This is Dr. Ben Weitz with the Rational Wellness Podcast, bringing you the cutting-edge information on health and nutrition from the latest scientific research and by interviewing the top experts in the field. Please subscribe to the Rational Wellness Podcast on iTunes and YouTube, and sign up for my free ebook on my website by going to drweitz.com. Let's get started on your road to better health. Hey, Rational Wellness Podcasters. Thank you again for joining us today. And today we're going to talk about the skin. And this is the first time we've talked about the skin, and yet it's such an important topic. Affects every system in our body. And essentially, if you look at the skin as an organ, it's the largest organ in the body. And our interview today is with Dr. Trevor Cates. Dr. Cates is a naturopathic doctor, and she also has a master's degree in spiritual psychology. Dr. Cates worked as a nutrition and wellness coordinator for the Waldorf Astoria in Park City, Utah, and she is now known as a spa doctor. And her focus has been on helping patients achieve glowing skin and vibrant health. She has a weekly, very popular podcast known as The Spa Doctor, and she's in private practice in Park City, Utah. Dr. Cates, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Good, good. So I was reading one of your blog posts, and you said that you have found 5 holistic skin discoveries. Can you talk about what those are?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I talk about all these in my book, Clean Skin from Within. But, you know, I think some of the most important ones are the way we look at skin. And a lot of times the way people typically view skin, because of the typical dermatology model, is to look at skin as something that needs to be suppressed. And so a lot of the typical conventional approaches are like topical steroids or antibiotics that are just designed to suppress the symptom at hand. But the way I encourage people to look at skin is that your skin, as you mentioned, it's our largest organ. It's right on the surface of our bodies. It's actually giving us information about our overall health. And it can be used as a tool to help us see that, because it's on the outside. We don't need special imaging equipment to see it. We don't need to do any specific lab tests to try and find out. It's just right there, and it's giving us all this information. Are you, if you're breaking out, is your skin dry? Is it more dull? Do you have eczema or rashes or all these different things? Those are signs the body is giving that something is out of balance. And so it's really about getting to the root causes. What is behind the skin issue? Because here's the thing, when you address the root causes, it's not only going to help your skin, but those root causes are usually the same root causes that are related to most chronic diseases, most disease processes. So if skin is your only issue, or maybe your skin's not optimal, and you address those root causes, you can prevent a number of other health problems. And then if you have other health issues, you can also, when you're addressing the root cause, you can help overcome those health challenges more quickly by using your skin as a tool. And as a doctor, it's something I've been using in my practice. I've been in practice for 18 years, and I always looked at my patient's skin as giving great information. It's part of the physical exam, is what signs is it showing? And so instead of just covering it up, let's figure out what sign is it trying to give us. Let's get to the root cause, address those, and then help heal the skin from the inside out.
Yeah, that's great information. I think those of us in the functional medicine world sometimes have forgotten about doing physical examination. And, we're so quick to do all these lab tests and look at numbers, and really looking at the person, looking at their skin, looking at their posture. Some of those things can give us so many cues about their health.
Absolutely. And it gives you information about what is coming up. And then also, as for functional medicine practitioners, as they're treating a patient, how well is that going? And skin is one of those key indicators. So one of the reasons why I've started focusing on skin is I was working at the Waldorf Astoria Spa in Park City, and I was doing a 2-week weight loss program for the people there. And it's at the end of the 2 weeks, what they would say is, I've lost weight, I have more energy, you know, all these great things that we're used to saying and hearing. And then the thing that surprised people was their skin. And what they would say is, I didn't even know my skin could look this good. I just assumed that you know, eczema was that thing that I have, or acne, I'm just going to have acne breakouts, or I'm at this age, so my skin's going to look more dull. But at the end of the 2 weeks, they realized, I didn't realize that my lifestyle impacted my skin this way. And so I keep encouraging both, you know, the public, the patients, as well as practitioners, to use this as a tool. It's right there. And it makes it so much easier for us.
So in those holistic skin discoveries, you also talk about how products you put on your skin end up getting into your body and affect your internal health. And I'm not sure everybody's aware of that and the importance of being careful about what you put on your skin.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times that's one of the big misconceptions out there is people will think that whatever they put on their skin is just going to stay on the surface, or just not even really thinking about it because they're not eating it. They're not thinking about how it's going to get in internally. And of course, if we eat something, if we put something in our mouth, we do absorb it differently than we do on the skin. I mean, it's a different absorption, but our skin is permeable. And it's one of the reasons why we use nicotine patches or hormone creams or topical medications, because we know that it's going to get absorbed to a certain extent. And so the products that we're using on a day-to-day basis also can get into our bloodstream. And the research is definitely showing this. Things like parabens, which parabens are a preservative used in a lot of skincare products. You see paraben at the end of the word. And where we found that is that parabens—
Things like methylparaben,
propylparaben, butylparaben, all of those, that parabens have shown up in breast tumor tissues. And so we know that gives us really great, and other studies have shown it shows up, you know, in the urine and other places too. So we know that what we put on our skin is getting absorbed in our body and can get taken up into tissue. And with this particular study, it's really disturbing that it can actually be taken up into breast tumor tissue. So we need to be careful, because also many of these ingredients have hormone disrupting effects. They're endocrine disrupting chemicals like parabens. Parabens are known to have estrogen mimicking effects. And that's really the last thing we want to be doing. But as we, especially for women, as we tend to get older, we tend to use more skincare products to try and reverse the signs of aging or slow down that process. But many of these have these hormone disrupting chemicals and can actually throw off hormones when we're at a place where that's the last thing we want to be doing. So, and I know that manufacturers say that we only absorb a small amount. Only a small amount gets into circulation. But my concern is that we are exposed to these endocrine disrupting chemicals now more than we ever have been. And they're in our air, our water, our food, and our personal care products. And because of the endocrine disrupting chemicals that have been made in the past, and that maybe they're banned to be made anymore, but they still exist in our environment. Things like
PCBs, yeah.
Yeah, and then also in countries like maybe in China, something is still manufactured there. Those chemicals can actually travel in clouds from China and rain down into our own environment. And it's still these are continuing to exist, and then all of these new chemicals are being developed, and so we are now getting exposed to more than we ever have. And so, and I don't want to say this just to scare people, but we want to make choices to reduce our overall exposure. And one of those places we have control is through the personal care products we use. And on average, people use 9, this is according to Environmental Working Group, EWG.org. They say on average, people use 9 personal care products a day, which exposes them to 126 unique ingredients. That's a lot of different ingredients. And some of that we have research and information, and some of that's still unfolding. And then there are the concerns of how did all these chemicals react with each other, which is not being studied. So our bodies become this soup of toxins and these endocrine disrupting chemicals. And so with the endocrine disrupting chemicals, what that means is that these will bind to hormone receptors and either mimic hormones or interfere with the way that they're supposed to work. So they can we're now seeing that they can create a number of different health issues, from infertility, from early puberty onset to thyroid disease, to certain types of cancer like breast cancer, prostate cancer. There are a number of different things. Really, if you think about endocrinology and all the different ways that hormones can be impacted, it really can impact us in so many different ways.
That's great. Can you mention some of the other chemicals we should be looking for that might appear in our personal care products?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is really important for us to be looking at these. We look at food labels as educated consumers and practitioners. We look at labels to make sure that our food is clean. We look at our supplements to make sure that they're the right ingredients and the right combination, and there are no fillers and binders and all those kinds of things. So we want to do the same thing with skincare products. And so unfortunately, though, it can be a little confusing. It is one of the reasons why I decided to create my own skincare line, because I wanted to be able to provide something for my patients, my followers, that is trusted, that I know the source of these things and where they come from, and that they're not only clean, but I formulate them in a way that actually help improve the health of the skin, the pH of the skin microbiome, and all that. But with ingredients, one of the big ones that is in so many products and that people aren't aware of the potential downside of it is fragrance. And fragrance is actually not an ingredient. It's a whole group of ingredients. But with personal care products, all they have to do is the manufacturers just put the word fragrance on there. They don't have to disclose all the different chemicals that are in there. And so there are actually a lot of endocrine disrupting chemicals that can be hidden in there. One of the examples that you won't see on the label, but is in most fragrance, is diethyl phthalate. And diethyl phthalate, DEP, is a type of phthalate, and phthalates are known as plasticizing agents. And phthalates, including DEP, are known hormone disrupting chemicals, EDCs. And so it's best to either go with a fragrance-free product or find one that's naturally scented with essential oils.
One of the things that I've noticed is they tend to take out the chemical that everybody knows about, like BPA, and they stick in BPS, which isn't on the list yet, but probably will be in 5 years. And I've seen, some of these personal care products where they take out the sodium lauryl sulfate, and there's some other chemical that sounds very much like it. And I suspect it probably would have the same properties.
Right. And that's why it's best to go with a natural skincare line that is really used to making natural and organic products. Not just one that, a company that has a natural line, but one that specializes in it, because they really know and they really care, and they're going to try and continue to use those natural ingredients instead of just saying, okay, well, we'll take this one out because the public is aware of it. Like a lot of companies are now trying to go paraben free. And so they're taking those out, but they're still loaded with a lot of other harmful ingredients that people might not be aware of. And, things like formaldehyde releasers. And formaldehyde releasers are one of those, it's a really confusing ingredient because they've got really long names, and there's a variety of names that they can come from. And it doesn't say formaldehyde on the label. It doesn't say formaldehyde releaser. They'll say things like DMDM hydantoin, which you would have no idea that when you put these ingredients on your skin, when you rub them on your skin, it releases formaldehyde into the air around you. And we know that formaldehyde is a carcinogen. We know it's toxic when it's inhaled, and the manufacturers say, well, it's just such a small amount, it's not going to be an issue. And that's why it hasn't been banned as well by the FDA. But, again, when we using all of these things on a regular basis, it's the products that we're using day to day that are the biggest concern. If you use a product once every now and then, your body probably can do okay getting it out of your system. But most of us have these habits and rituals of skincare, personal care practices, whether you're a man or a woman, deodorants and shampoo, conditioner, lotion, sunscreens, all those things that we use, we're using them every day or every other day. And so those are the ones you really want to be careful with.
Yeah, I just read this report about a woman who had a Brazilian blowout, and she was using a formaldehyde-free product, except that it contained this chemical that as soon as you heated it, it turned into formaldehyde. And she had this acute reaction, was hospitalized, had this horrible autoimmune reaction, and her whole health was just completely destroyed.
Yeah, and it's it's one of those things where sometimes it's hard to know. So just again, using a trusted source, and again, that's one of the reasons why I created the Spa Doctor skincare line, is because my patients were asking me, who do I go to? How do I know? And even as I was trying to do research on different companies and trying to find out more, a lot of this stuff is hidden. And so I wanted to create something that people could trust, that they don't have to worry, one less thing for people to worry about, because that's really just not something we want to spend a lot of time doing. But there are great resources for people. My book, Clean Skin from Within, I do talk about all the different ingredients to avoid, the top ones to avoid. I have a whole list in my book, and why, and the research behind why, and then alternatives, like instead of fragrance, choosing essential oils and which ones, and that sort of thing. And then there are also websites like I mentioned, Environmental Working Group, ewg.org. They have a Skin Deep database. My skincare products are on there as a verified skincare line. And that's, EWG can be a great resource for people finding cleaner products. Also, there are even apps you can get on your phone that you can scan the barcode on the product, and it'll rate the level of toxicity of the ingredients and why it's rated that way.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about the pH balance. What pH should our skin be? Should it be slightly acidic? Should it be slightly alkaline?
Yeah, no, our skin does best with a mildly acidic environment. Our skin has this mild acidity that actually helps protect it, because it is, it's our outer surface. It has our epidermis has that barrier function. That's a big important part of the function of this organ of our skin. And so that mild acidity actually helps protect the skin. So the thing that's really interesting about this is that I think a lot of people don't know this about the skin, because when we talk about health and wellness, there's a lot of talk about, higher pH. And
yes, that's all everybody talks about. You have to be as alkaline as possible.
Right. So, but when we're talking about the externally on your skin, it actually needs to be 4.5 to 5 in that pH range, which is that mildly acidic range. And if it's really a lot lower than that, if it's really acidic, that's also harmful for the skin. So there is this interesting natural balance, and it does vary a little bit from person to person and different areas of the skin. But this also helps with the skin microbiome. And I know there's a lot of talk right now in the health and wellness community about the gut microbiome and the importance of that. And the skin also has its own balance of microorganisms that live on and protect it. And so our gut microbiome has a direct connection to our skin microbiome. And there's a lot of great research coming out about the gut skin connection, even the gut brain skin connection. And so from the inside out, there's a lot we can do to help promote the skin microbiome, but also what we're putting on externally on the skin can impact the skin microbiome. So using those antibacterial soaps and things, that definitely disrupts the skin. And then the pH of the products that we're using can also disrupt it. So for example, even water has a neutral pH of 7. And so if we're some people will say, well, I'm going natural. I'm just rinse my face with water and use a little coconut oil. Well, just using water is not going to help support the skin with that natural pH. And then using like a bar of soap that lathers up, that actually has a high pH. So it's going to further disrupt. Now, if we're in a really optimal state of health and we're, rinsing our face with water, our skin will probably just, bounce right back and reestablish. But especially if people are struggling with their skin or they're struggling with their health, that ability to bounce back is not going to be as good. So it's good to support the skin with naturally the mildly acidic skincare products. And that was one of the big keys that I found with creating my skincare line, because when I was looking into natural skincare products, my patients, before I created my line, people would ask me, so why are these natural skincare products not working? I'm using clean products, but the natural skincare products I'm using aren't working. And what I realized is that a lot of these companies were missing out on that pH of the skin, and that the support we use with the pH of the products is one of the really key things that helps with the health of the skin.
You know, that point you made about the pH, I think is really important. And a lot of people are not aware that the same thing goes for parts of the gut. Everybody assumes that they know that your stomach is supposed to be acidic, but then they assume the rest of the gut is supposed to be as alkaline as possible. But in order for optimal gut microbiome, for acidophilus to flourish in your colon, you need more of a slightly acidic environment.
Yeah, yeah. So it is important to put an environment there that supports a healthy, the healthy microbiome. And I do think that a lot of times people are quick to like, what probiotic can I take, or what is there a probiotic I can put on my skin? But you can also look at what helps support your body in developing its own healthy balance of microorganisms. And I mean, probiotics are also really beneficial, but you want to do both. It's, there's it's not always about a magic pill or a magic product. And,
Yeah, you need your garden to be healthy. If you get these great seeds, they're not going to grow if you're trying to grow them in a lousy garden. And that's what your body is, a garden that you've got to try to make it as healthy as possible to encourage the growth of all these healthy bacteria.
Yeah.
So I saw one of your discussions where you talked about acne, which is the most common skin condition. What is the cause of acne? What's the root cause of acne?
Well, with acne, it does vary somewhat from person to person, but looking for the root cause is important. And when we look at why someone is developing acne, we want to look at a number of different factors. Does it change for a woman, for example? Does it change at different times of the month? That's a big one. A lot of times women will notice right before their periods that will break out more. So then we're looking at a hormonal connection there. So we want to look to the root cause of that. What kind of hormonal imbalances are occurring that are causing the person to break out more? Also, we know if we're talking about a teenager and they're going through puberty, obviously there's a hormonal component here. And then there are also nutritional things that can lead to more acne breakouts, like zinc deficiencies, for example, or one of the things that can trigger it. Also certain foods that people are eating. It can be a sign of a food intolerance or food sensitivity allergy if they're starting to break out more. I often see people with breaking out more around their mouth. That can be from the foods that they're eating. And some of the big ones for acne in particular in food is sugar, or foods that turn to sugar. So the glycemic role and the glucose role in acne breakouts, because when we eat sugar or foods that turn to sugar, a high carbohydrate diet also would do this, and it will cause our blood sugar to rise, and that increases insulin. And then with increased insulin, that triggers excess sebum production, the oils in our skin, as well as androgen activity. And we know those are some of the big things that do trigger acne breakouts. So certainly balancing your blood sugar, being careful about not eating a lot of sugary foods or foods that are going to spike your blood sugar. That's a really important one. Also, I find that dairy is another big trigger for acne for some people, not everybody. But
now, what's the connection with dairy?
Now with dairy, it seems to be more because it's a few reasons. It's more of a pro-inflammatory food. And so anything that, I call it skin inflammation, anything that triggers inflammation internally can trigger skin inflammation, inflammatory conditions. Also, there are just the nature of dairy is that it comes from a lactating mammal, which means there's going to be hormones in in dairy products. And so that could be playing a role as well. So that could be part of it. And then dairy products tend to be one of the top allergenic substances or foods that people are sensitive to. So they do tend to be one of the big trigger foods for that. So there are a number of different reasons. And then another food that is a big, a lot of times I'll have people say, okay, well, I gave cutting back on the sugar. I'm really not eating much sugar, and I've cut out dairy, and maybe they've even cut out gluten and a few other things, but they still can't figure it out. And they know that it's something that they're eating, but they can't figure it out. And that tends to be eggs. And I know that surprises a lot of people because we think of eggs as being this really healthy food, just like, a lot of times people think of dairy as, it was one of those foods that we thought was really healthy for us. But eggs, for some people, are a big trigger for acne. So I would say if you struggle with acne and you've tried giving up these other things, try cutting out eggs and see if that missing piece.
You ever run the food sensitivity panels?
Yeah, I definitely do a lot of those. Because I have a book and I try and keep it really simple for people. In my book, I talk about the top 10 foods that people to eliminate and then reintroduce after 2 weeks, and to try and identify it themselves. But certainly if people work directly with me, then I do like to run food sensitivity tests. What I would say about that, though, is what I found in my practice is really important to first address any gut issues before doing a food sensitivity test. Because if you run food sensitivity tests on someone who has leaky gut or really a lot of microbiome imbalances, then you're probably going to see that a ton of different things come back as reactive. And the patient is just frustrated in there. They don't know what to eat, and it's just frustrating for everybody. So when I see somebody that apparently has a lot of gut issues going on, definitely address those first. We want to at least get them on the healing journey with that first and get that inflammation under control and the leaky gut healed, and then do the food sensitivity test.
So if you do that 10 food elimination diet, could you just real quick go over those 10 foods? So besides dairy, what are the other 9 foods?
Yeah, I think some of the things might surprise people. I mentioned sugar, and I mentioned gluten and dairy. Also, when I have people do this diet, I like them to cut out caffeine and alcohol. They just tend to be, especially this is a time to help support the detoxification pathway. So cutting out any of these kinds of things is good to do. And then I mentioned eggs. I also find that corn tends to be one of the trigger foods, as well as the nightshade family. So peppers and tomatoes and potatoes, those are also big triggers.
Okay, cool. So what else can you do for acne besides changing your diet?
Well, there's certainly we want to decrease inflammation, because there's one of the big root causes of what can you do with your diet, not only avoiding the trigger foods, but also eating foods that decrease inflammation, things like getting omega-3 fatty acids that are anti-inflammatory. Those kinds of things are really important. Making sure that you're getting plenty of fiber in your diet to help with balancing blood sugar.
And by the way, on the omega-3s, it's important to get it from fish, right?
Yes, I do think that fish is the best source, and I think that it's hard to get the level of omega-3s through just eating with your diet. A lot of times people need to take a high quality omega-3 fish supplement to get the benefits if they're really trying to address that inflammation. So I think that's good. Now, I know that sometimes people, for philosophical reasons, they don't eat.
They just want to have flaxseed oil or something like that.
It makes it a lot harder because the body then has to do that conversion. And so it's not ideal. I will still have some patients that just for, certain reason they won't. But I really do and try and encourage people to, even if they don't like the taste of fish, to try and take an omega-3 supplement. And
yeah, because you're looking at like between 1 and 10% conversion rate of alpha linoleic acid into EPA and DHA.
Right. Yeah. It's just not going to be the same. So it's a lot easier to do it that way. Yeah. So certainly anti-inflammatory diet, because we're reducing inflammation. Also, what can we do to help balance the blood sugar? Because that's one of the big root causes. So eating more fiber, watching your sugar intake, making sure you're eating balanced meals. And then also if we're, looking at balancing the hormones, what can we do to support that? And it really depends upon if we're talking about a man or woman, what stage of, life they're in and what kind of hormone imbalances we're talking about, but doing things to help support that, even if it's, lifestyle things of stress management. I mean, even that alone that plays a role. Our stress hormones play a role in our hormone balance. The foods that we eating for women, and particularly eating cruciferous vegetables, helping with estrogen metabolism, and hormone balance, all of those kinds of things might be beneficial to do. And then also getting in certain nutrients like zinc, as I mentioned before, certainly eating things like nuts and seeds that are high in zinc, oysters, not that we want to be eating those every day, but that is something that's high in zinc, but also maybe getting it in the form of a supplement. And then if you're doing that as a supplement, you want to make sure you're not just taking zinc. You want to also get a little copper with that, or part of a balanced multivitamin mineral supplement.
Yeah, the zinc copper ratio. Besides those, are there other specific supplements? I saw some discussion of niacin as being beneficial.
Yeah. Niacin, B vitamins in general can be particularly helpful. Niacin, both, and what's interesting about niacin is that it can be used both internally and externally. So I will have my local compounding pharmacist make up a topical that includes niacinamide in that topical, because of the soothing and anti-inflammatory benefits that it seems to have with people with acne.
Yeah, I saw some products online with niacinamide they seem to have in it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Boy, huge difference in price. One product was $6, the other one was $84.
Right. Well, it probably depends on the amount of niacinamide, but you really want to get at least 3 to 4% in there. And if it's not, then it's probably just marketing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And let's see, in that article where you were talking about, or it was a podcast where you're talking about acne, you mentioned eating cruciferous vegetables for liver detox, but to be careful if somebody has a thyroid problem.
Yeah. I think it's good to, if we're talking about cruciferous vegetables, just because of the goitrogenic component in those vegetables, that people, especially if you have a thyroid disease, thyroid imbalance, that you just want to lightly steam those vegetables first before eating them. And I generally just say that across the board.
For people who are not familiar with that, there's this concept that certain foods negatively affect the thyroid, and they're referred to as goitrogenic. They inhibit thyroid function, right?
Yeah, the idea is that they can actually help. I mean, they can worsen the condition. Yeah. So that's why, just to be safe, I think it's good to just lightly steam, and it doesn't. When I say lightly steam, it's just even a couple of minutes, just to put a little, hot water in there for a couple of minutes and steam it lightly. Because if you overcook vegetables, then you lose a lot of the nutritional benefits. So it's a little balance there. I grew up in the South, and I think I grew up with family members that thought that you had to cook things for hours. Vegetables had to be cooked in lard and for hours and hours to have any flavor, to be palatable. So
yeah, I did too.
The case.
Grew up eating canned vegetables. So one of the other common skin conditions is eczema. How do you handle eczema? What specific things do you do for that?
Yeah, and that is another common skin condition. It's actually what kind of led me on this journey. As I had, as a child, I had a lot of allergies and eczema, hives. Those were a lot of my skin issues, and I really struggled with it as a child. And that is what finding natural medicine is what led me on the path to becoming a naturopathic physician. So I know that really well of how intense that can be to have that itching and the rashes and the eruptions and how intense it can be. But I also know that you can overcome it. And so part of that is that inflammation, addressing the internal inflammation, looking for triggers that might be causing it. So definitely supporting the body internally. Gut issues tend to be a big trigger for that. Gut microbiome, addressing any imbalances with that, and leaky gut where you've got the gut lining is more permeable than it should be. So then food particles actually slip through and the body creates this immune response, which will flare up allergic or really kind of any kind of immune type reactions. And anybody that has eczema tends to have a sort of an overactive immune system anyway. And so we want to do things to help calm that down. And, I'm talking a lot about this internal stuff, but you also want to do things externally, like I mentioned before. And this is true for acne too. When we get acne or eczema, our skin microbiome gets out of balance. And part of restoring that is from the inside out. But part of it is also, and I think it's probably like 80% is from the inside out. But then there's still this 20%. And this is one of the things that shifted for me in my practice when I started doing a lot of research on topicals, on skincare products, was that realizing that this was a piece that I was missing of what can we do externally to help support the skin? Because it's still, you get patients and they would get them to a certain point and they would be really improving, but there's still this imbalance in the skin on the outside. And so using products with the correct pH, that's key to help support the skin. And then also I use my compounding pharmacist a lot to help create topicals that have natural ingredients that help support the skin and help it get to that balance back.
Like what kind of topical products?
Well, I mean, for the acne, I mentioned niacinamide.
Right.
So that can be a great, and that one's also can be very helpful for people with rosacea. So, there are things like that. There are certain herbs that can be anti-inflammatory and supportive. I mean, even something as simple as like aloe, it can be soothing to the skin and helping restore it. So there are tons of ingredients that we can use. It's just a matter of I really individualize that part for the person. But the thing that across the board is helpful are things, there are certain ingredients like aloe and also the pH of the product that can be really supportive to the skin.
I saw where you said that sometimes for psoriasis, you'll use apple cider vinegar topically.
In combination with other products, I wouldn't use straight apple cider vinegar. But yeah, it can be soothing. It also could be disrupt the pH of the skin if you're just using it straight. So I would be careful with using that directly. Yeah.
Okay, great.
But you also things like there are also really simple things for eczema. We're talking about eczema is like an oatmeal bath. You can put oats in a bath and just soak in that, and the oats on the skin can also be very soothing.
Cool. And
I share a lot of that information in my book, Clean Skin from Within.
Okay, great.
So I have a lot of that, and I even have tables explaining here all the different things you could add internally and externally to help support the root causes that are behind the various skin issues.
That's great. And that book's available from Amazon and Barnes & Noble?
Yep, it's available. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of that on my website, thespadoctor.com. Yep.
Okay, great. I'll put that all in the show notes.
Great.
So thank you, Dr. Cates. This has been a very informative podcast. Thank you for sharing some information with us.
Great. It's been great to be here.
Okay, so I'll talk to you soon.